U.S. vetoes of Security Council resolutions that charge Israel with one or another crime. Actually, the U.S. vetoes resolution charging itself with crimes, too. If we had a free education system in the United States, everyone would know that the United States is the only country that has rejected a World Court decision. In the past, it was one of three. Libya and Albania also hadn't accepted them, but they've since accepted them. So the U.S. is in splendid isolation. That was a World Court decision calling on the United States to terminate its terrorist war against Nicaragua. Of course, totally rejected. That went to the Security Council. There were two resolutions calling on all states, didn't mention the U.S., calling on all states to observe international law. The U.S. vetoed both of them. France and Britain politely abstained. So there are outliers in the world, but Iran's got an awful government, nobody doubts that. But there are other outliers, maybe more significant ones, certainly more significant for us. Well, it's going back to Israel-Palestine, it's kind of strange on the surface that the conflict persists. Why is it called unresolvable? Toughest problem in the world. I mean, there are plenty of problems in the world where it's hard even to conjure up a solution, to imagine one. In this case, you can not only conjure it up, but everyone knows what it is. And furthermore, the whole world agrees to it outside of the United States and Israel. And in fact, it's even got international law on its side. It's supported by the Arab League. It's supported by the Organization of Islamic States, including Iran. It's supported by the relevant non-state actors like Hamas. The resolution, the basic contours are very well known. Two-state settlement on the international border, pre-June '67 border, perhaps with minor and mutual modifications. That was the official U.S. term back in the late '60s and early '70s before the U.S. departed from the world on this issue. So settlement on the international border is a ceasefire line, so kind of messy, with minor and mutual modifications and various conditions about Jerusalem, refugees, and so on. Well, that's a solution. But much like the nuclear-free, weapons-free zone, there's a barrier, and it's right here. The U.S. won't accept it. And as long as the U.S. doesn't accept it, Israel feels entirely free to continue to violate it. Now, that's been going on since the mid-'70s. In 1976, January '76, the major Arab states brought a resolution to the Security Council calling for a settlement roughly in these terms, recognizing the rights of every state in the region, including Israel, to live in peace and security within recognized boundaries and all the standard diplomatic terminology. It was vetoed by the United States. Again, in 1980, record in General Assembly is similar. A veto by the United States is in fact a double veto, or maybe a triple veto. First of all, it doesn't happen, and secondly, it's vetoed from reporting, and third, it's vetoed from history. So you have to look pretty hard to find out much about this. That's what it means to have overwhelming power. Those are some of the prerogatives. Overwhelming power and a very obedient intellectual class, which keeps things quiet, doesn't make sure that young minds aren't distorted by knowing too much about the world. But in fact, in this entire record of 35 years of U.S. rejectionism, there's one exception, and a very illuminating one. It's in 2000, the year 2000. It's not the one people talk about. Everyone talks about the Camp David negotiations, which failed, but that wasn't the end of it. After the collapse of the Camp David negotiations, President Clinton recognized that the U.S.-Israeli position at the negotiations could not be accepted by any Palestinians, even the most, what are called moderate ones, pro-U.S. ones. So Clinton, in December of 2000, issued what he called his parameters. They were kind of vague, but somewhat more forthcoming. He then said that both sides, Israel and the Palestinians, had accepted his parameters. Both sides had made reservations to them. Well, they met in Taba, Egypt in January 2001 to try to iron out the differences, the reservations. And they made quite a bit of success. In their last press conference, we know a lot about this. It was internationally monitored. There's extensive reports from Israel, most of it in Hebrew, but some in English. So we know quite a lot about it. They practically reached agreement. In their last press conference, they said if they had a few more days, they could have reached agreement on every issue, pretty much in line with the international consensus, tweaking it here and there. There were a few issues still. Israel called off the negotiations prematurely, and that was the end of formal negotiations. Informal, pretty high-level negotiations continued, leading to some agreements. The main one's called the Geneva Accord. It was rejected by Israel, ignored by the United States, so that's down the tube. All of this is quite significant. It means that a resolution in terms of the international consensus is feasible if the United States will permit it. Unfortunately, there's very little sign of that. Well, meanwhile, the U.S. and Israel are just extending and deepening the illegal occupation. In 2005, September 2005, Israel made a sensible tactical decision. The right-wing government, Ariel Sharon's decision, the government decided that it doesn't make any sense to keep 7,000 or 8,000 Israeli settlers in the Gaza Strip, which by then had been half destroyed, taking maybe a third or more of the resources and land, and protected by half the Israeli army. So he made the decision to transfer the settlers illegally settling in the Gaza Strip to the West Bank, which is much more important. Now, it could have been done just like that, just a flick of a wrist, But they decided to stage what was called a national trauma. So there was a huge trauma, completely farcical. If they'd want to do it quietly, all they had to do was announce that on August 1st, the IDF, the Israeli army, is going to leave the Gaza Strip. At that point, the 8,000 settlers would have climbed into the trucks provided to them, and they would leave their subsidized homes in the Gaza Strip to subsidized homes in the West Bank. But you don't get any propaganda out of that. What they wanted was a trauma. So it was staged, big front pictures on the front pages of, a little boy pleading with the soldiers not to destroy his home, Boston Globe and so on, and shouts of never again and so on, no more Holocausts. And it was pretty effective. Actually, it was a farcical repeat of a similar staged trauma in 1982 when they had to take settlers out of Egypt, out of the northeastern Sinai. There were commentators in Israel who just ridiculed it correctly, like one of Israel's leading sociologists, Baruch Kimmerling, died recently, just ridiculed the farce as it should have been done. But it played where it mattered, here. So never again. We've got to hold on to the West Bank. Well, after the technical withdrawal from Gaza, Israel maintained its total control, and it was pretty vicious. It picked up in intensity a couple of months later when the Palestinians committed a serious crime. There was a free election in Palestine in January 2006, and they voted the wrong way. Now, that's not acceptable. You can do all kind of things, but not that. You don't vote the wrong way in a free election. So the U.S. quite openly, Israel too, of course, turned to punishing the Palestinians for this crime. And it wasn't secret. Like, you can read it in a column on the front page of the New York Times, right alongside another column which is lauding our magnificent messianic pursuit of Wilsonian ideals and supporting democracy and so on. There's no contradiction. Orwell, may recall, had a concept which he called